You're listening to Finding Your Genius Zone with Dirk Nevelle. With the help of successful individuals across industries, Dirk breaks down the unknown parts of every vocation while highlighting the importance of finding a career where you can leverage your natural skills, passions, and interests. Now here's your host, Dirk Nevelle.
Everybody, this is Dirk Nevelle. Welcome to my podcast. On with me is a friend of mine, Sean Reynolds. Sean, welcome.
Thanks, Dirk, and I appreciate you having me on today.
Thank you. Sean, we were talking a little bit before I hit record, and I know Sean is a podcaster, but he's deep. And so I'm talking to a pro, so I'm a little nervous. I want to make sure that I'm performing. So a little backdrop history with Sean. So I got to know Sean back in the day when I was a lender, and Sean is, Bellevue is a big city, but it's not so big when you grow up there and you know people. But Sean was one of the best appraisers, was very dialed in with our company. He was the kind of guy that we would go to, and when we're in situations like, is this house truly this value, whatever, but very good at what he did. I would always try to get Sean to do my appraisers back in the day. And then when they changed the rules and I couldn't talk to him, but very, very smart. He also started a real estate company. And he's also a podcaster. And so he's got a lot going on. And what I love about his story is, one thing led to another. And right now, I really feel like when you talk about the zone of genius, he is in his flow. And I think it's important just to kind of look at what he's done. And sometimes things can take a while, but the two companies that he started before kind of feed his podcasting. So I think it's a really cool story. So I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to let Sean talk a little bit about what he does and kind of pay attention to the three entities.
Yeah. And thanks for that intro, Dirk. So I started off working for my dad, who owned the appraisal company that I now own. He left in 1989. He went down to Texas. He was doing a ton of investing, and he sold the company Reynolds and Klein Appraisal to his partner, Frank Klein. And then I ended up buying that company in 1994, 1995, somewhere in there, long time ago. And I've been operating and running that company to this day. We've had as many as, I think, 12 appraisers, something like that. Now we're down to just a handful. But in 2001, I started my own real estate brokerage because my appraisers needed to have the key to get into vacant homes. And a lot of them like to do a deal here or there. And so I started Summit Properties Northwest, and that has grown into, I think we've got somewhere between 90 and 100 real estate brokers. And so both of those companies are still kicking along. And in 2015, I really ramped Summit up from about 25 brokers to maybe, 75 or 80, somewhere in there. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, I thought, along with a lot of other people, that real estate was just going to be dead, because nothing was going to be going on. And I had already started doing a little bit of podcasting, maybe one a month or so, to promote Summit Properties Northwest. And so it was called the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. So I had that going on. At the beginning of the pandemic, I decided I'm going to podcast every single day, because if real estate's dead, then I need something to do, because I'm not good at sitting around. So we started daily podcasting, and then, real estate went the other direction. It just took off. And so I've been daily podcasting now since March of 2020, got stuck at 50,000 subscribers for about a year. I mean, just couldn't figure out which way to take it. And then most recently, we found some content that's been happening, and we're up over 80,000 subscribers. I think 81,000 subscribers now. And that's really starting to take off. But what's funny, Dirk, is that I no longer really talk about real estate. People know that I have that background, but I talk about a bunch of other stuff. But I can always bring that background in to whatever content I'm talking about, because I talk about a lot of public safety issues. What happens when you defund the police, stuff like that. Why is crime elevating the way it is? Things that impact real estate, but people don't really work through, the mechanics of how that works. So like you and I were talking before, 90% of my time is spent podcasting and video in YouTube. Yeah. But that doesn't pay the bills, because we're just not there yet. It'll pay a good portion of the overhead, but it doesn't cover the bills. So my Summit Properties Northwest and Reynolds and Klein Appraisal, when we're not dead slow, like we have been basically the last 6 months, we're kind of just emerging from that. It all works out. It all works out. So I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing. I never really thought I would, be recording 3 podcasts a day, because we release 12 a week, two on Monday through Friday and 1 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday. And we premiere each one of those. So I sit in on the premieres every morning at 9 o'clock. That's my work day. I start at 9 o'clock because I'm going to be with a couple hundred people that want to watch that day's video, and I'll chat with them. We've got a live chat going, and a bunch of other stuff. So that's kind of where I sit.
So I want to go deep on the podcasting, but before we do, I want to go backwards a little bit. You worked with your dad and you ended up buying the appraisal company. Walk me through a little, just out of curiosity. Were you college here in Washington, or did
UW?
you?
Okay. UW. I worked through high school. I worked through college. And then I got married, had a kid, and bought a business at either age 23 or 24. And then the next year we had a major recession. And so I got to work through my wife quitting her job, having a kid, and having a business that wasn't making any money. Trial by fire,
Was that the appraisal business?
Yeah, it was the appraisal business. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So
which just absolutely tanked. And I've got this 1-year-old. I'm going, maybe this wasn't the greatest idea in the world. But, you work your way through and you take on some debt and you figure it out, and, you live to fight another day.
So you jumped right into, there wasn't like a gap, 10 years, 5 years. You got right into the appraisal world pretty much from the get-go.
Yeah. My dad saw that I was pretty good at what I was doing. And he's like, I'm going to have that kid work because, he's going to make me some money. And I did. And then my dad took off in '89. So it would have been my junior year of college. So I worked for his partner. And I got, I worked for my dad for a long time, really young. But then I got, a pretty hardcore Coast Guard guy. Military background, that's where I learned from. That's how I got my skill set. That was my mentor in appraising. And he is hardcore. Like, this is how it's going to be done. This is what we're doing. This is wrong. This is right. We're going this way.
You're talking about your dad.
No, talking about my dad's partner.
Oh, partner. Got it.
Yeah. But then he got a divorce and he left in '94. Mm-hmm. And so I'd been working for him for a couple of years. And then he's like, he got his second or third divorce. I can't remember. And he said, I'm done. I'm moving to Mazama, Washington. You can buy the business. And so a partner and I bought the business. I think we paid like 27 grand for it,
right?
Something like that. Just not a lot of money. But the business wasn't really worth anything either. It was just relationships that I'd built. And so, bought the company, and then down the road, bought out a partner, and then started up Summit. And then I've got Fight Club Media, which now produces News for Reasonable People, the daily podcast that I do.
I love it. So people are watching right now. So there's going to be like a 3-prong effect. We're going to talk a little bit about the appraisal world, a little bit about real estate, and maybe dedicate more of the time to the podcasting, because I think that's really interesting for me. So people are coming on. We won't get too deep on the first two, but tell me, just as an appraiser, like I had a podcast with one appraiser, and it was really interesting. We went like 50 minutes and there was a lot of questions I have. I won't do that with you, but what is it about the business? Like, what's your biggest surprise? So if somebody's coming out of school, they're thinking about becoming an appraiser, like, what is it that you've learned that maybe you didn't know that would be really important for them to know before they kind of dedicate time, resources, et cetera?
You got to be able to analyze numbers, but you can't be so stuck in your head that you don't have the flexibility to go, okay, there's another angle to this. Maybe there is some more value there. I think a lot of people are so black and white, or so cut and dried, that they're not able to function in a world where there's always a value range for a home, but we have to put a certain pinpoint on it, because that's what the lender is going to lend on, right? Maybe it's $1 million, but in reality, that value range is probably $950,000 to $1,050,000. having the flexibility to recognize, hey, maybe my original number that I put down isn't, maybe there's some room there. Maybe there's some flex there. And I think a lot of people with like really rigid, whatever they went to college for, maybe math, maybe it's good to have a math background, but being able to have some flexibility as an appraiser, to me, is kind of what made my career what it is, because I'm able to say, my number isn't set in stone. I'm willing to look at your data. But then again, if I think my number's right, I'm going to say it's right. And that's a lot of what my career was built on is, okay, if there's another number there, I'll look at it, but I'm good. I'm going to apply my way of valuation to it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, does that make sense?
Yeah. I love what you're saying. Cause like that quality that you have, Sean, I remembered that. Like you weren't so rigid and stuck in your way, like a traffic cop, like flexing your muscles because you could. You were, it's like an underwriter. A good underwriter is willing to look at the big picture and, and even in podcasting, like, we're talking about Joe Rogan, for example, like I like people that are willing to like, maybe I'm not right. Maybe I missed something. And I think that's a really important quality, for a good appraiser, because I know there's a lot of voices back in the olden days. You'd have guys like me calling and saying, hey, this is,
can we get 10 grand more? I need 10 grand more. Can we get 10 grand more?
But you're like,
I'll figure it out.
But you were always cool about it. I mean, and you also have to like be compliant, and you need to make sure that, the bank is hiring you to do a job, and you need to make sure the collateral is valued accurately. So you don't want to, screw them and give them a fake value or a value. So you're very good at what you do, but that's an interesting point. Is there anything about being an appraiser that you didn't like?
There was a lot of stuff I didn't like. The valuation technique is based upon a formula that in reality doesn't make any sense. It's based on matched paired comparable sales. So if this house sells for this much and this house sells for this much, this one has a 2-car garage and this one doesn't, the difference is what that 2-car garage is worth. In reality, we all look at housing differently. Your wife, your significant other, your spouse might love the kitchen. The next dude's wife might hate it. That creates a value issue because they're willing to pay XYZ for this. They're willing to pay XYZ for this. But the methodology of appraising is such that it's supposed to be cut and dried, and it's not, because real estate is, everybody sees things so differently. What you need versus what somebody else needs, what, your sibling wants out of real estate, wildly different. And so from that standpoint, appraising's kind of tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah. Well, you are, and you were very good at it when we used to work together. I think it's a good thing you bring up, because I'm thinking about like somebody that is an appraiser that has strong opinions, that's used to kind of doing it his or her way. You also are in an industry that you have to abide. There are rules, there are methods. So the wiggle room,
federal rules. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of, I don't want to say you have to bend the knee, but it's not a total, like things that you need to think about in career. Like this is an example of the ability to be an individual or be flexible and call your own shot. Like you are in an industry in the appraisal world that you can be you, but you also, there is a line you can't cross, or you have to operate within a certain spectrum. So I think it's a good point you bring up. What did you love about the business? Is there something that stuck out?
There's so many different neighborhoods that I know like the back of my hand, little things that you wouldn't know, like little mini marts that I stopped in at to get a snack, to get a water, to get some lunch over the years, because I've traveled all over Western Washington appraising. I can now talk about stuff that comes up in a podcast about, I did a waterfront home up on this area, and here's the deal. You've got massive slides in Magnolia. I did a slide home back in, 1992, and here's the deal. So I've got all this history of stuff that you wouldn't have if you didn't have that, if I didn't have that background. Now, the big thing that I think people are going to want to know is, how do I become an appraiser? That's always a huge one. People ask me that all the time because you've got this process where you have to get 2,500 work hours, experience hours within a 2-year time frame. And you also have to have a college degree. And you also have to have like 180 hours of like not continuing education, but just education. So it's this massive commitment. You got to be a college graduate. And then you've got to go get an internship with somebody. And they're going to pay you peanuts for that internship because you're not able to write a report on your own. You've got to co-sign with somebody else. So the state laws are really onerous to getting into the business. It's really tough. And I don't take on trainees because it's ultimately my liability with their work, but they're doing most of the work. And so it's a tough gig to get into. If you can get in, you'll make some money. Because it's such a, you've experienced how backed up appraisals have gotten. I mean, what a nightmare. And on the appraisal end, we've been working overtime, but because there's not enough appraisers and nobody really wants to go into the industry, the other massive issue that I think is coming up is artificial intelligence. Those bots that basically can figure out value are getting better and better over time. So I think the appraisal position is going to go from a valuation standpoint to more of a property inspection standpoint. Okay, you inspected the home. It's this condition. We're going to take our AI. We're going to take our chatbot GPT 4.0. We're going to apply it. And here's the value. So I think that's the way things are moving forward. So I wouldn't tell anybody to not getting into appraising, but I also wouldn't tell them to expect it to be there in 10 years, in 15 years, because I think the industry will change massively.
I'm glad you brought that up. So I do bring in AI a lot on my podcast, and it does. I'm not on the alarmist spectrum, but I definitely think it's going to eliminate a lot of jobs, including mine, to be quite honest, in the lending world. I mean, maybe we're still around, but it's scary. I mean, it's interesting. I was talking to someone. I was watching this podcast, and they talked about, and their terminology, not mine. They said a moron's IQ is like 70. And I'm surprised. I don't know if that's a politically, but that's what they said. Maybe that's
yeah.
And they said Einstein was 160, and the smartest person ever recorded was like 210. So 3x of a moron, right?
Yep.
And again, their words, not mine. So they're saying this, the AI, the chat, it's going at 1,000x. So we don't even know, we don't even know where it's going or where it's taking us. And it's going so fast and so quick that it's like impossible for us to try to figure out, what it's going to do to our society. And one guy was talking about, he's like, right now it's like a child. He's like, they are listening and watching us, and they are trying to figure out how to be human. And, the fact that they're going at 1,000x, I don't know. Personally, I'm scared. I think it's going to be really, some people are like, oh, it's going to be great, but I don't know what the heck it's going to do. But there are a lot of jobs that aren't going to be around because of AI. On not to go too deep on the real estate side, but same kind of lines of questions. Like if someone wants to be I know that you run a company, you manage a real estate company. I don't know if you were ever a realtor going out and showing homes, but
I sold a handful back in the day, and I did go out and show homes. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
So I guess, again, I've had a lot of realtors on. What's your take? Like, I guess what would you say? Like, what did you like about that? What did you hate about it? Like, what's your advice to someone who's thinking about either becoming a realtor or maybe wanting to run their own shop?
Running your own shop is like running any business. It's got an inherent amount of risk. It's got an inherent amount of reward. You got to be good at running a business. I already knew I was good at running a business before. So I just took that skill set and said, okay, I'm going to run, this is going to be my shop. And so on the Summit side, I've got a super simple model. It's an 80-20 split. It's a $10,000 cap, and there's 0 desk fees. So it's a real basic. That's why I'm able to manage it with 95 or 90 brokers, whatever it is that I have, on top of the appraisal gig, on top of podcasting, because I don't have all of this extraneous Now we're going to do this kind of marketing. We're going to do this. We're going to do this branding. We don't really do that. So I would say on the business end, if you're a good business person, you can run a real estate brokerage. It's not that hard. As far as selling homes, I never really enjoyed that because you got to be a real people person. You got to really enjoy getting in a car with somebody for XYZ number of hours, showing them homes and hoping that they pick one. And then you got to kind of convince them this is the best one. And then you got all the negotiation. And, we always say buyers are liars. You run across all kinds of stuff like that because it's big money. Real estate is typically somebody's biggest investment. So there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of, the drill. I mean, you've been caught in the crossfires how many times on a transaction going south? I mean, it's brutal, right? It's brutal. Didn't really enjoy that. I like to be a little bit outside of that. And if somebody wants to take shots at me on YouTube, which they do all day long, my mom watches all my stuff. And she says, when I started getting going on YouTube, she's like, Sean, I hope you've got a really thick skin because people are taking some big hits at you. And I'm like, Mom, I know. It's just keyboard warriors, right? People get behind some, name that isn't theirs and then just start pounding that keyboard and you're an idiot because of this, So each industry has its own thing, right?
Yeah. I want to get into the podcasting. I am curious though, like you went to UW and then high school, where did you go?
Bellevue Christian on Clyde Hill.
So were there signs like, again, I keep tying this back to say someone that's struggling, that's coming out of college, high school. And I think college is great, but I was shocked that you need a college degree to be an appraiser. Like I think college is great, but I also think there should be a gap between high school and college. Like go work, go do something and just get a feel because there's so much money and time invested in college. I think it's a shame that most of the time people come out of college and they don't know what the hell they want to do. Again, I love college, university, but I feel like there needs to be a little bit of something in between for people to it's like dating, got to figure out what you like. But what kind of guy were you? Like, were you an athlete? Were you a musician guy? Like, what were you like?
I was student body president my junior year. I set probably 25 records in cross country and track. My 800-meter record still stands from 1986. I lost my 1-mile record in 2009, and I graduated in 87. So I was a pretty good athlete. I graduated with a 3.7 GPA, but I'm also a college dropout. I got enough college hours and I was grandfathered in before you had to have a college degree. When I started appraising, there was no licensing for real estate appraisal. That happened with the FIREA Act of 1989, Federal Financial Institutions Recovery Reform Enforcement Act. I mean, what a long name, right? I mean, and so that got the ball rolling on, having to all these requirements. And so I kind of got grandfathered in not having a college degree, but I bailed out halfway through my junior year because I looked around at, the education I was getting and I was like, this doesn't really apply to what I'm already doing in the real world. I don't really care. I don't really think I need a degree. And I've never really looked back. I've never really had a regret. I've also never once had a job interview. I've just never had one. You know what I mean? That's something weird about me because I never experienced that. I've been, my own business owner for so long. And now I'd probably make an absolutely terrible employee because I always think that, my way is right because I've been doing this for 30 something years and there's no other way it could be except mine. Right. No, you get stuck in your own head.
I hear you, man. I was just thinking like, my wife just started working again at a company and she was updating her resume. And I'm like, shit, I don't even have a resume. Like I haven't needed a resume in 25 years. Back in the day when I worked for Mark Cuban. And then we were bought by Yahoo. I mean, back in the day then I had to, and so if you're watching this, like, I want you to pay attention to like, get beyond what the job is. If you want to be a pilot, a dentist, whatever, like the lifestyle. And then one of the things that like is coming up with you is I don't know if you intentionally tried to do this, but so in the lending world, I don't have an annuity income. Annuity income is like a financial planner or a commercial insurance person that builds a book of business. It takes a lot of time, and you got to renew it, keep your clients, but it pays you X amount per year or whatever. And as you go farther along in the career, you keep getting paid, whether you get up. You got to show up for work. I didn't mean get up or not, but like you have to do your job. But like in my world, I get paid on loans I funded, and if I don't fund any loans, I don't get paid anything. What you've done, which is really interesting, is you've created an annuity from your two previous companies, which aren't really annuity type jobs, right? Appraisers,
they're not. Yeah,
no,
they're
I mean,
not.
you got to, I mean, that's one of the things about appraisers, like that I don't think I would like is how do you scale that? Like the make more money, you got to do more appraisals. And there's only so much time in the day, but like, which is cool. If you're watching, what Sean has done is he's built two successful companies, created an environment where he can kind of step out and have it managed, on its own. And yet he's getting this income from them. So I think that's really important to think about the career and how you get paid. Is it a one-time deal or is it an annuity or whatever? But getting into podcasting, the interesting part about podcasting for you, as we talked a little bit about this, is here you are doing, I don't want to say commoditized, appraisals, real estate. A lot of people do those jobs. And now Sean has this chance to be Sean. Like your individualism is coming out. Like nobody's doing what you're doing. I mean, not really. There's people that have shows, but now it's like a 180. You've done something so different now. And I guess the question is, how does it feel to get to be you? Like, it's not about your appraisals. It's not about you selling a home or listing a home. It's about your opinion, your words, your style. Like, how does that feel? Because it's so different from what you've done before.
You get 100% of the win. You also got to take 100% of the responsibility for when you tank, for when you suck. And you will tank and you will suck. I've had strikes against my channel. We've been taken off for just stuff that I wasn't aware of. I had to learn an entirely new vocabulary. I had to learn background on stories that I had never read before because I'm a real estate guy. I know how real estate goes. I know nothing about, I knew nothing about what I'm into now, which is a lot of public safety stuff. I didn't know how all this worked. So it's great in one sense. It's also really scary some days waking up and going, oh my gosh, maybe I should have just really ramped Summit up more. I'd be making more money. I'm not making enough money to cover overhead, but I'm going for the long haul. I'm doing the long play. And that to me, I'd rather do the long play any day than take a short term, because it's comfortable. I'd rather be way outside my comfort zone, sitting way over the edge of my skis going, well, this might work out. And this might also absolutely crash and burn. That's what I like about it, because, it's like, you're playing the dice game. You're going to come up with sevens. Well, if you work hard enough, you could. And so I'm now on a trajectory where I'm taking on a lot of subscribers, and that feels really, really good. But then the pressure is, okay, so you got to keep doing it. You got to keep reinventing yourself. So that's all I've done, Dirk, is I've really reinvented myself 3 different times. And here we are. Some guys are, and you've done the same. You're going down a different route. I think people should know how many loans you closed. Like when you were killing it, there was like Dirk Nevelle and some other dude from like Cobalt way down here. I remember one year, that's all people talked about. You absolutely crushed it. Do you remember what year that would have been?
Well, I would like to agree with you. I think my good years, there was a few guys at Cobalt that were right there. Maybe even above me.
That's not what I heard, Dirk. That is not what I heard.
No, honestly, I mean, I'm so insecure right now. I would lie and tell you no, I'm kidding. No, I did good. I mean, I had a really good team, and I'm not trying to be Mr. Humble, but I knew. So this is an interesting point. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm not the best lender, but I was in a business that it's a popularity contest. And I knew a lot of people. I grew up here. Yep. And the reason I'm saying this is because if you're listening and you're like, oh, lending, you gotta, if you know people and they like you and they respect you, I mean, you can know everybody and be the class clown, but they might not want to manage their money with you or trust you with their financial.
Have you sell their house? Yeah. Have you get their mortgage?
Yeah. And people knew I was serious and I cared. And that's the thing about me. And and I was lucky too. And I was in a market with rates dropping, and like right now I'm really struggling. I'll be honest. I'm really struggling.
Dirk, everybody in real estate is. And if people are telling you they're killing it, they're lying.
Yeah. Well, I just saying, like, the reason I bring that up is if think about the career you're going into, and do you have control? Like, you might go into a career that the market can really mess it up, and you have to be open for that or be aware of that. Because, you know, as a lender, you know, if rates go up to 8 or 9%, you might be kind of screwed for a while. So just kind of pay attention to the industry or the career you want to get into and understand what can affect it, good and bad. But yeah, I had good years. I had a really good team. I worked with Scott. Legacy Group was a really great company. And it was a hard business to scale, but yeah, I had some good years for sure.
What year do you think was your best year? I know there was a refinance boom. There was and you kind of specialized in jumbos, right? You did a lot of I know you did everything, but you crushed it a couple of years. I was telling my son, Kiernan, who is one of my appraisers, that he had one of your deals come across from Legacy. And he's like, Dirk Nevelle, I've heard that name before. And I kind of told him the history. There was a year, was it like 2000 and change, that you drove in so much business. I mean, it was insane, right?
Yeah, I did. I had good years. I did.
Yeah, you did.
And here's the thing that's important about that is I wasn't happy. Like, I wasn't sad. No, but I wasn't like, I didn't have like, I mean,
no work-life balance. Yeah.
No, I had balance. I did. In fact, my best year, I went to Italy for 2 months with my family.
Wow. Okay.
But you, I created a system, that a team, and the team was the most important, but it wasn't me. I was just a dude that knew people. And I worked hard.
But that's an important dude to be, because without that dude, that team doesn't have jack.
Yeah, you gotta, I mean, here's the catch-22. They work way harder than us, the processor, the LOA, but they don't have the context. So it's kind of like, there's a little bit of bitterness sometimes, especially if you're a jerk and you don't treat your team with respect, which I always did. But like, you got to know people. And so if you're somebody that's dialed in and you know people and they like you, respect you, you know, sales can be great. And I was business to consumer, meaning anyone that I bumped into in the street, whether it was a dentist or someone I played hoops with, could be a client. And then there's also B2B, business to business. So when I was at Yahoo or working for Mark Cuban, I sold to marketing directors at technology companies who I didn't know. So there wasn't really a stickiness because they didn't know me. There was no real true connection. So in deciding what you want to do in terms of sales, understand who you're selling to, understand if you have a comparative advantage in that, like, do you know people? And if you're moving from New York to Seattle and you're the greatest loan officer in the world, but you don't know anybody, you're kind of screwed, at least for a while. So we're talking about me now. Okay. So we'll get back.
I thought it was important for people to know kind of at what level you operated at one point. And it was like substantial. Everybody that was in the mortgage industry knew who you were and knew the volume, the level of volume of deals you were doing, because you were heads above. I mean, I think you were head above everybody else. There was a couple of guys that were like, you know, half lap back, right? In track terms, but you were way out there, and you had some killer years.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't even know. I didn't think about it like that. Like, it wasn't important to me. Like, I liked the money. I liked the freedom. But it wasn't like I was proud of myself. I didn't want to win that race. And that's what I think the important issue is. I was running a race that at times was exhausting, but that's not the race that I wanted to win. It's not how I wanted to be remembered. I didn't want to introduce myself as a loan officer. Nothing against loan officers, but And I think that's the thing that I want people to pay attention to is make sure if you want to win a race, make sure it's a race you want to win. And it gets exhausting when you're doing something day in and day out that you're not truly passionate. And by the way, I'm still a loan officer. I'm good at it. I care. I'm a good person to do your loan with. But, I see people excel, like blow me out of the water. And these are people that are truly, truly passionate about what they do. Like you, I think what you're doing with podcasting is there's a new energy. I mean, I know you and I don't hang out all the time and we're not the closest of buddies. I like you a lot, but
I see you every now and then at the club.
Yep. But I noticed something in you. Like, I feel like you have this energy, and that's with the Genius Zone, that's what I want people to find. And so you mentioned something about being a podcaster. You had some blow up. I forgot the terminology, but you talked about strikes, but you had some negative things happen. Like, what are those? Like, was it controversial content that you talked about, and then all of a sudden you had people attack you?
Yeah. So super interesting. So right before the elections, I talk about some conservative topics. I talk about defunding the police, terrible idea, how things impact values in real estate when you take away zoning. A lot of what are considered progressive ideas don't translate well to the business world. And so I talked about a campaign video that a guy down in Arizona did. He was one of 5 candidates for a congressional position in Arizona. I played a video of his where he talked about the original members of the Ku Klux Klan. It was this controversial video. He did a video about how the original members of the Ku Klux Klan were like Democrats or something, which was technically true.
Yeah.
And so I played that video and I just talked about it in the context of, is this marketing that should be, it was a big, huge deal. Now, a bunch of left-wing podcasters did the exact same thing. Their accounts were fine, but YouTube told me that I was promoting, political violence by talking about a video that was literally a campaign video showed all over Arizona, but my channel got taken down for 1 week. We got a strike against us. I'm not able to reach out to any fan members. Just all of a sudden, like that, the channel goes black. So that's a strike. We had another strike, a warning for talking about the coronavirus. That's an off. You can't talk about that. You will get demonetized. You will get censored if you go down any kind of discussion of that. It's like when you go to Instagram and you see all these warnings. It's like, well, who's coming up with the warnings to ultimately be the truth teller here? There's a lot of censorship that goes on. So I've had to figure out, okay, where are the lanes? Like, where are the lanes to stay within? Because the rules and regulations are so onerous that you don't know. So I've got a secondary channel. I've got a private subscription channel called reasonabletv.com. It's $10 a month. And that's where I talk about all of those topics. And we got a bunch of subscribers. And that is held on Rumble, because Rumble doesn't censor, whereas other entities that start with a Y do.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I'm trying to build that out right now myself. And we talked about this. I don't like to bend the knee. Like, I'll die. How do I say this? Speaking my truth, right? And I'm also very curious. I'm a truth seeker. Like, there's a lot of controversial topics that I've been hit with over the last few years that I'm very credible on. Like, I have over a decade years of experience researching, but if I'm wrong, I want to know if I'm wrong, and I'm okay with being wrong. The problem is the other side, and I'm not getting political here, but some people just can't be wrong. And that's a really dangerous place to be when people are cognitive dissonance. They're locked into a belief system that they can't even fathom changing their mind or their opinion. So you're dealing with some interesting issues, fun, but I think there's a happy medium. I think there's a way to speak your mind, and you've learned a lot. One thing I want to be I don't know if I want to get too political on this stuff, but I am curious, just financially, compensation wise, if someone's looking at you and they're like podcasting, they want to do their own show, whatever. How are you compensated? Like, for example, YouTube, I know there's probably sponsorship, advertising. How can someone get paid or make a living as a podcaster?
Yeah, you can get sponsors, but then the content has to be okay with them affiliating their content with you. We make our money. So I'll give you a rundown. In the last 28 days, I think we've had 1.8 million views. I think we've had 190,000 watch hours, something like that. I think we've brought on 7,100 new subscribers. And for our portion of that, through AdSense, through Google, selling to their advertisers, our portion will be about $7,800, something like that. But we're putting out, 2 full-length half-an-hour podcasts per day, and then one on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So we're putting out a ton of content, which is more than the $7,800. But a few months ago, we were making $1,500, $2,000. Our best month was during CHOP, and I believe the advertisers absolutely screwed Black Lives Matter, the corporate entity that was running a ton of ads, and basically they paid me a ton because I was over covering CHOP and Jazz at the expense of Black Lives Matter. I was covering it from the standpoint of here's what's going on. Here's a business dude showing what's happening at CHOP, which was a big deal. And during those months, we made over 20 grand a couple of months just from advertising revenue. So advertising revenue from Google is massive, but then you've also got to stay in the lane of what their advertisers want. And if you do content that they don't like, they will tell you there are no advertisers that want to advertise on this particular video. So if you do run this video, you will not get paid at all. And if you don't get paid, YouTube's not going to push it out because they only want to push out content that is going to bring in advertisers' dollars. And we manually put in those commercials, right? We put one in at 2 minutes, put one in at whatever. You can put in as many commercials as you want until you don't piss people off. Too many commercials on your videos. And so, that's just kind of how it works. Merchandise is another one. That's a huge one. We've also got a Discord
real quick
channel.
I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I want to make sure. Okay. I kind of, the way my brain works, so you have say a YouTube channel, and you've got, like right now, I just launched 20 of my podcasts. I've got another 30. I'll have 50, and I'm doing about 10 a week. 7 to 10. Okay. So you go to Dirk Nevelle and you see all these videos. So the advertising revenue, is that basically you're bringing in so many eyeballs, so many hours, so many views?
Hours of watch time.
Okay. So then is that income that goes to you, or is that seen by, like, now all of a sudden you see an advertiser in the top right or the bottom left, or what is that? It'll actually jump on as like you're watching television, a commercial will pop up during your podcast.
During my podcast, yep. During the video,
they'll
YouTube.
Interrupt it.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they have the ability. If you have a 40-minute video, they can stop, insert their ad in the middle.
Yes. So every 10 minutes, you can basically put an ad, say. So the longer form content you have, the better, because then it's like an hour-long TV show is going to make twice as much revenue as a half an hour, right? Because you've got slots for advertising. So in order to get monetized on YouTube, you have to have 1,000 subscribers, which took years. That was the uphill battle. I struggled for years to get 1,000 subscribers. Now I picked that up in 3 days. It's wild. You have to have 1,000 subscribers and you have to have 4,000 watch hours within a 1-year rolling basis, which means YouTube is saying, hey, we want you to have at least 1,000 subscribers. So this many eyeballs are watching. And also we want you to be putting out enough content, 4,000 watch hours. It sounds like a lot in a 1-year basis. And it is when you're just getting started. But now in the last 28 days, I've had 186,000 watch hours which if you work that out into years, I think it's, I don't know, if somebody sat down, it's like 60 or 70 continuous years of watching my content is what has been consumed in the last 28 days.
Congratulations.
So, yeah. So we're getting there, but that's also small potatoes compared to like a Joe Rogan, compared to like a Tim Pool, compared to, any of these other pretty famous people who get 250,000 views each video all day long. They're in their zone as well.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Like I've gotten a chance to, Jesse Itzler, I know Ben Greenfield was at one of our events recently. Some of these guys are huge, and gals, Matthew McConaughey and Tony Robbins did an event a couple of weeks ago that I did. So they're in. Okay, so this is interesting. So if you're listening and you're watching and you're curious and you're like, okay, I know I need to get paid. So you're putting together content that's being seen, heard, whatever. They're inserting ads. What about like the visual part of the page? Like, can you negotiate a deal with, say, a Nike or someone, or is that all handled by YouTube? Like,
it's all handled by YouTube? It's all handled by AdSense. Okay. So from one standpoint, you are their boy, right? You've got to create content that they think is appropriate. Whereas over on Rumble, I can do anything I want. I mean, anything. But you got 300 million people watching YouTube. You might have 1 million watching Rumble. So there's just no contest. There's no contest.
Do they ever say, Sean, hey, if you want to play ball with us, you can't play ball with Rumble? We saw that you have content over there. No?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah. They can't really do that. And it's on a subscription basis content only. So they'd have to get a subscription and kind of work its way through there. But literally, it's a crazy world. And we're not even talking about the audio portion that goes out to iTunes, that goes out to, Apple, that goes out to Spotify, that goes out to, we're syndicated on probably a dozen, probably like you are, entities for just the audio portion, the MP3 portion. But we don't really make any money on that because it's just, that's a super tough gig.
So how's the money made on audio?
Same thing. You can get, you can get sponsors. Somebody can pay you. I haven't chased after any sponsorship because I want to do things 100% my own way. And that's another thing. A lot of people get to where I am and then jump on board with the locals, jump on board, with another entity that is going to, really launch their career. Whereas I take my 2 real estate companies and basically just pave the way financially so that I always have control. And that's one of those things I've learned from watching like Joe Rogan is always have control over everything. So like when he did his $200 million deal with Spotify, he didn't sell the podcast. He sold the rights to watching those videos for XYZ number of years. I mean, he still retains 100% control of his entities. And most of these big media companies want you to basically turn over all your rights, and then they'll license you and they'll, get you going.
You mean like all the shows he's done, they want to own that content.
Yeah. And that was the big battle with YouTube. Is that they were telling him, hey, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And Joe Rogan said, no, I'm doing things 100% my way. And even when he made, when he first got on with Spotify, he made some comments about trans people that all the trans folks at Spotify found very offensive because he was speaking the truth. And they wanted to take him off. There was a big push to take Rogan off of Spotify when they just paid him. I think at the time they said it was $100 million, but it's more like a $200 million deal. But it's all based on revenue. So if you're driving in all these eyeballs, $200 million isn't really all that much in the big scheme of things. So it's all kind of scale. And so that's why I've done everything on my own, because I want to own it so that in case one day I get really big, I'll get compensated as well.
Yeah, it's funny. So I have my stepdad is kind of he's a businessman, but he's also kind of a politician. So he owns the Seattle Times and he's a publisher. And I remember years ago, this is a funny story that relates to you. I forgot his name. He's a very conservative radio guy. It's still going locally. John, I think he's the top guy. Do you know what I'm talking about?
John?
Shoot, I'm blanking. Anyways, something happened with my stepdad, and he was talking about him in not such a positive light. And I was protective, like nobody's going to. So I called in.
He's talking about your dad?
Stepdad.
Your stepdad?
Yeah,
okay.
And I have a point to this. And I remember calling in, and I pretended I was
going to the radio show.
Yeah. And I called him, and John, God, what the heck is his name? I think he's the top talk show guy. And I don't know. He was pretending to be really close with my stepdad. So I was quizzing him on how well did you know him? And I remember like just you're talking about the personal stuff, people attacking you. And it's the other thing is, in the world of appraisers, real estate, mortgage lending, it's not such an emotional place to play or work. And I remember like Frank lives in a world like that. You're getting involved in controversial topics. I think for the audience trying to figure out where the hell I'm going with this conversation is you have to like know if you've got this, like your mom said, the skin or the whatever to deal with this kind of stuff. Cause you're in a totally different world. It's not about some lender pissed off because you came in 50K under value. It's, you have a whole group that's, whether it's transgender, whatever the group is, they're attacking you. So it's got to be a little weird for you to kind of get out of the world you're in and now into this world where there's so much emotion and fire. And like, it's like right now, I get a little freaked out. Like there's just so many, I don't even know sometimes what to say because I'm going to piss off some group. Yeah. And like, it's like walking in a minefield.
Absolutely.
How do you become a successful podcaster, speak your mind, not bend the knee, and be authentic?
Well, that was one of the reasons I went to recording 3 full podcasts a day, is because with that, you have repetition. It's like doing one loan after another. It's like doing one appraisal after another. You get better with time, right? And so the more you do, the faster you do them, you can experience what that feels like. Okay, I talked about that, and these people got so upset with me. Here's how I'm going to approach that down the road. So you get to work through all of kind of your checks and balances. And the way I view it is that I've got to learn my third skill set, and I'm 54. I mean, that's pretty cool. Not everybody gets to do that, because when you and I grew up, you worked for the same company for 30 years. You got the gold Rolex, and you checked out and you retired, and maybe you lived another 10 years if you were lucky, right? I mean, that's the brutal reality. Now we have the option to go recreate ourselves because of technology.
Yeah. So what makes you so good at, the numbers don't lie, right? It's a data world. You have subscribers, you have an audience. There's a voice that you're providing people, an opinion. What is it you think that you're doing so well? Why are people listening to you?
I think they see me as normal. They see me as not affiliated with any particular political group. They see me as a business guy, still got one foot in the business world. I'm willing to say it the way it is. I'm willing to go out and shoot video. I shot video down in Portland with my son, who is now deceased. And it was so violent in Portland during the race riots that I shut down like a live stream because I got too scared. I had my kid with me, and he's, 6 foot, 215, 220. And I'm about the same. I'm 6'1", 215. We're not small guys, but we were in such a position that it was like, okay, yeah, we're shutting this bad boy down, this live stream down, and we're going back to the hotel and regrouping. And we did. So I am willing to put myself in those positions. And I think people respect that. And then I always just kind of tell what I think. Yeah, I speak the truth. And if you look at a lot of the big media out there, it's all got just this certain agenda. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this. And, a lot of it is what's going on with Tucker Carlson right now. He's on a little bit of a hiatus, and he's moving his show to Twitter. That's a lot of what's going on. Media world is changing dramatically. CNN's numbers dropped off the face of the earth when Trump didn't get reelected. They were a bash on Trump entity. So things change so quickly. And the stuff that Elon Musk is doing, he went through and just gutted Twitter, cut 80% of their workforce. And he basically stated, well, if you're not censoring everybody and if you don't have a political agenda, apparently you can run Twitter with a lot less employees.
I remember that soundbite. That was
fantastic.
Here's somebody, I'm trying to think who was asking him, or was it Bill Maher or somebody was, I don't know. No, it's interesting.
It was somebody like that. Yeah.
These are
Might
really
have been Bill Maher. Yeah.
These are really, very divided, divisive. I guess not to get too political, but I'm so curious, like the division that's going on. I even felt it living in my neighborhood, a neighborhood away, just on opinions that I had that weren't popular. It shocks me. Like, to me, like people say conspiracy theory, but I feel like there's a real effort to divide and dismantle what we have. And I think a lot of the causes, like, I'm open, like, I'm not saying that we're perfect. It's, we should stay the way it is. I'm always open for improvement and changing, but it just feels that the agenda right now is to divide. And I think at the end of the day, I think most of us, left or right or whatever, I think we all aren't that far off from our points of view, but right now it makes you feel like you are. And that's my biggest, like, aha, like, this is weird. Cause I don't think that, 80% of us, 90% of us actually differ that much. We might on a certain issue or whatever, but it feels like sometimes like I'm 2% against 98%, but I don't really think it's the way. Anyways,
that just feels that way. It feels that way.
It really does. And maybe we jump on a different podcast and go deeper on that. I just think it's interesting to hear, like, if you're listening to Sean, like, here Sean is in his zone of genius, in my opinion. You're naturally interested in this content. And I think it gives you, correct me if I'm wrong, but it gives you a lot of energy, right? You seem to have some juice.
Yeah, because it's something new. I'm not doing the same thing. I'm not doing the same thing. I don't have to get up and do the same thing. I get up in the morning and I'm like, I get to go talk into a microphone for about 3 hours over the course of about a 3-hour period. I'm not out doing appraisals. Sometimes I really miss the appraisal gig. I miss just getting out on the road on my own, turning up the radio and just driving to my next house, and seeing houses and seeing people. I do miss some of that. But now that I think about my life and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go do that and I'm going to get paid for it. This is so crazy. So I guess I would tell younger people, if that's something you want to do, just go do it. Because I've got a stack of books. Probably I went on Amazon when I first started this, and I've got probably a dozen how to be a profitable podcaster. And I never read one of those books because I was too busy doing daily podcasting and figuring it out on my own. And I always tell myself, maybe I should go back and read those books. And I'm like, why? I'm already doing it. And I've had to live through, trial and error. And we've had some terrible errors. Some bad errors, but I think that's part of learning. So
red light, green light.
Stop, go.
Well, yeah. Things happen. And I think it's funny. Like, for me, like, I haven't read any podcast books, but, like, you know what? I told my wife, I'm like, she's like, when are you gonna start putting these up? I'm like, I don't know yet, that side of it. But I'm just going to keep working on content. I'm going to keep having really good conversations with people like you. And then, things will kind of organically unfold, which they have. I'm getting close to Joe Rogan on viewership. I'm not quite there, but I hope to pass him up in a couple months.
Any day now. And then Spotify will be knocking with a 300 million deal on Dirk's store.
That would be cool. Cool. But hey, as we wind this up, is there anything that I haven't asked? You've got all these different, experiences, appraisal, real estate, podcasting. But at the end of the day, this podcast is about finding joy in what you do and aligning it with what you were born into this world. I do believe, there are people who don't care about what they do. They just want to fish 2 weeks a year and whatever. But there are people that I think have a lot of voices in their head. They don't really pick careers based off their natural skill sets, interests, and passions. I'd like people to think more like that when they're younger, and I think the payoff is you might be a lot happier in your life down the road. Is there anything I haven't asked you in terms of advice or questions or advice you might want to give to the audience before we wrap this up?
Get a job that you can tolerate for a long period of time that's going to pay your bills. And then in your off hours, work towards what you really want to do. Don't give up that first job, because that's what's going to pay your bills. So you're not living with your parents. You know what I mean? Be an adult. And then if you need to work your rear end off, creating that career that you're going to launch into, then that's how you do it. And unfortunately, it's just 2 words. It's hard work.
Great.
You know, that's what I would tell people. And that's what I tell young people. Well, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. I'm like, okay, well, how are you going to, until you get there, how are you going to pay those bills? And nobody wants to talk about that because that's not fun. But if you got a family like you and I do, you know, you're going to have to pay some bills at some point in time, and you're going to have to be an adult. And unfortunately, the only way you get there to overcome what you don't already have is to just go ham. Yeah.
Or be brave enough, go for what you think. If you know what you want to do, you want to be a vet, you want to be an artist, a movie composer or a music composer, like go for it. And then maybe you get a side hustle at night, bartending to pay the bills. But I will tell you, when you play it safe, and I played it safe. I jumped into sales jobs, and I'm good with people and I can sell, but I'm not terribly persuasive. It doesn't really excite me, but like, you pay the price when you go down the road. And I'm not saying that I regret my life, but give it some clear vision and thoughts, and get quiet. And whether it's meditation or talking to people that know you, and just think about what makes you unique and different. Think about what energizes you. And my advice is try to align that within your career. And if you're in a career that you're like, no, this ain't it, then get the hell out. And
figure it out.
Yeah. Anyway, Sean, you're great. I really appreciate, you've got a lot of skills, range. there's a lot of stuff here to unpack, but I think you're a great example of how to do life. You've done, again,
I wouldn't go that far. I've had some successes, but I've had some real bad down. I had a divorce that was, just soul searching. I've had some of that too. So you got to be willing to take the good and the bad. But I know what you're saying, and I appreciate it, Dirk.
But here you are, though. You're having fun. You're changing lives. People are listening to you, and I think I think you like your day. I think that's.
I do.
Monday morning. You're not like, you're not hating life.
I'm not hating life. And what I tell anybody out there is, if you want to get into media, take your camera, start recording yourself, start recording whatever it is you want to do, post it, see what people like, rinse, repeat. Figure it out.
That's great advice. Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Dirk. And I appreciate our relationship over the years. I've known you forever. You're a great guy. And if anybody wants a loan, Dirk Nevelle, he's got some experience in there too.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Sounds good, Dirk.
All right. See ya.
Thanks so much.
Sure.